Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in to Coast AM. I'm your host this evening, Dave Schrader. We've got a great show lined up for you. 100 Bigfoot Nights, a chilling true story. For years, we've heard about Bigfoot. People speculate that it could just be a guardian of Earth. It could be an interdimensional being. Most encounters seem pretty benign, other than the occasional just being spooked by this large, hairy creature as it seems to be going about its business. But is there a darker, more sinister side to these giant bipedal creatures? We'll find out from a woman who's had this experience one too many times. It's been stalking her family. Could it be one creature or a myriad of creatures? We're going to talk about that this evening as we go along. 100 Bigfoot Nights, a chilling true story. This true story sets out to chronicle the terrifying encounters that a residential family has had with the creature known as Bigfoot. Accompanied by video, photographs, and audio evidence, the story is written in Christine's own words as it unfolds. And according to a Bigfoot investigator they contacted, they aren't going anywhere. As the world gets more crowded with us, they are left with less and less habitat. They have learned to live in the shadows and pass through the forests by our homes. So this is what we're going to spend the evening talking about. We'll open up phone lines later on in the show if you have questions for our guest or your own strange cryptid encounters. I want to hear about them this evening. We've got that and more, and I'll be hosting again tomorrow night on Coast to Coast AM. I hope you'll join me because we've got another interesting set of topics. Something in the woods is taking people. Steph Young will be my guest in the first 2 hours of tomorrow night's show, and then Roy Bainton will join us for the last 2 hours with the Mammoth Book of Unexplained Phenomena. We'll talk about everything from ghost ships to cryptids and more. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be joined by our guest and hear about her terrifying encounters with Bigfoot. We'll do that next on Coast to Coast AM. Good evening. This is Dave Schrader, your host for the evening of Coast to Coast AM. And we've got a very interesting show to discuss with you. The two books that are out right now, 100 Bigfoot Nights, a chilling true story. Christine Della Parker is our guest on Coast to Coast. We'll be discussing her strange encounters with Bigfoot. Welcome to the show, Christine. Thank you for being here.
Yes, hi, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Christine, I want to know, before we launch too deeply into what's been going on, walk me through a little bit of your life before this event. Did you ever have a belief or an interest in Bigfoot, or was that something that didn't even ping your radar?
I've always believed in Bigfoot because I just can't imagine people seeing it all the time and it not being a true creature. I have always been scared and terrified of them. But I tried to stay out of the forest because I figured that's where they would be. So it was always I won't say an interest, but I would say a belief.
All right. And did you ever have an experience in your life where you thought you may have crossed paths with one of these creatures?
No, never, no. In order to cross paths with them, you would have to be in a forest to be near them, so no.
See, that's like me. The outdoors, I'm not a big fan of the outdoors because there's too many things out there looking to kill me and eat me, I think. So it's much safer. I'm an avid indoorsman myself. I guess we never have to worry about bumping into Bigfoot if we're safe indoors, right?
Correct. That's my belief. That's common sense. Common sense would tell you. You don't want to run into a Bigfoot, don't go in the forest.
Exactly. It's so much safer to sit in the living room and, read and watch TV and play with the kids than go outside. And, of course, I kind of joke. I had my own weird encounter with a Bigfoot when I was about 11, 12 years old in Alabama. And that is an impactful moment when you see something like that. Now, talk to me about the beginnings of this story for you. You'd always kind of known about this, heard about this.
Yes,
did this just suddenly appear in an area where you had lived your whole life, or had you moved into their territory?
We moved into their territory without knowing. And we bought a house. My husband retired from the military. And we decided to stay in the state that we were last at. And we bought a home. And it was pretty, it wasn't a perfect home. It had a lot of damage. And it was what we could afford at the time. So we figured we had the time to renovate, and it was a good deal. Little did we know that it was too good of a deal, but we had no knowledge. There's a forest across the street from our house,
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I've always come from a large city, so I thought it was just a vacant lot, just the front of a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that it was a forest, that it went behind, or no clue. And we just figured, great, this house has no neighbors across the street. And it's on a corner, it would be quiet, it's in a neighborhood where there are lots of other houses. It's a wonderful housing tract. The only thing is, it was the worst house in the neighborhood, and we just thought it was a good buy. It never even thought about it, never even crossed our mind. We're in the middle of a city. We're 5 minutes from the freeway, and the main street has, all your local eateries, and it was just convenient. So no, not a thought at all.
So not an area you would have thought would be teeming with cryptids. This seemed far removed from your idea of where you would run into something like a Bigfoot.
Absolutely.
Now, you said you got this house for a really good deal. I mean, how ridiculous of a deal was it? And you don't have to give us the exact amounts, but I mean, was this something that this house sold for much less than you would have ever expected, or was it just, a little bit off and thinking, oh, well, this is a good little deal. Maybe it's just because it's, set back. And what was the rationale behind why it was so cheap?
Well, it was destroyed. It had a lot of damage.
Okay.
The housing market at the time, houses were going for, let's say $100 a square foot or $200 a square foot, whatever. And this one was at $60 a square foot. So it was considerably, I would say, one-third less. And all we had to do was fix it. We figured a little cleaning, that's why you get a good deal. You just have work, that you put in.
When you say it was destroyed, I mean, through the whole house, or was there just certain areas that seemed to be affected more than others?
It was through the whole house, but when we first saw the house, it was overwhelming. And there was stuff everywhere, and so there was obvious damage that we could see, but there was hidden damage after everything was taken out that we didn't see. And
now, did you ask when you did your walkthrough? I'm assuming you looked at this house prior to buying it. What was the reasoning for the damage that was done to this house?
There was no reasoning. They said that the family had several foster children and had taken in a lot of them that had, I don't want to say challenges, but had gone through a lot, and that a lot of the children could amount to some of the damage.
All right.
You see things of foster children having problems, and you just don't think.
It doesn't even have to be foster children. I'm the father of 7 kids, and I'll tell you, they take their toll on a house, not even trying to be destructive. Kids are just destructive by nature, running up the stairs, tripping each other, banging into walls. Yeah. There's always scuff marks and scratches and dents and dings. So, I would think that that's pretty normal for that kind of deal, especially if they have a lot of houses. And then if you do have children that might have some developmental issues or emotional issues, it might open up to a little bit more damage. I can understand that. But it wasn't like, the house wasn't falling in on itself type of damage, right?
No, the walls were there.
Oh, gosh.
The parts were there, but I really, at the time, I really thought that maybe they had taken on more than they could chew, and that they were overwhelmed, and that's why the house was in the condition it was in. That maybe they couldn't, they were trying to be good people, and they just took in more than they could bear. And it didn't really dawn on us. We just thought, well, it just needs to be cleaned and some repairs done, and it'll be a wonderful home. The layout is perfect for us. It had enough room. It has 6 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, and it was a good size. And we were looking for the room, and for what we could afford, at the time, that was it was a good deal, and we just needed to work on it. We weren't fully aware of all the damage, I must say, but my brain kind of went blank when we walked in. You go into somewhere and it's overwhelming, you just kind of shut down, you just walk
right.
out, you're thinking, okay, 1 room, 2 rooms, 3 rooms, 4 rooms, okay, it has rooms.
Right.
And, I don't think we thought about it, it didn't register.
Well, and specifically, it wasn't, you would think it's more natural, it's just the family that lived here. You had no idea that there might be something more nefarious going on.
No. Not at all. Not at all.
So you buy this house.
Yeah.
How soon after you move into this house do strange things begin to occur?
Well, I would say within the first few months, weird stuff started happening. The weirdest thing that I would say happened up front was we started to find different things that were wrong with the house, such as the coals in the oven, the damaged, all the broken doors, all the door jambs were damaged, the holes in the roof, everything just started. The holes in the garage was completely destroyed. And it was like you had to get on a ladder to punch holes in the drywall all around the top of the garage. And the garage door was bent and broken. The glass in the garage door, somebody broke the glass in it, and that's really strong glass. And, it's just all the damage. You start seeing everything, and you start thinking, how did they do that? How is this possible? And that was the first strange thing that we noticed, was some of the damage was really strange.
Now, did you ever meet with the family that owned it prior to you?
We met them when we first saw the house. We met the gentleman and the lady, and they were very nice. And we saw a couple of the children. And
did they act off at all, like they might be hiding something?
Yes. At the time, we didn't think anything of it. But thinking back, yes. The kids were just staring at us. They didn't speak. They were cute, two little girls. And, they seemed endearing, but they looked very sad. And the gentleman, they kept making excuses for everything. They kept saying, the kids do this and they do that and they run the house and, we don't have any choice over it. And they were making a lot of excuses for stuff that we did find. But, no, it didn't register. I hate to say it. We had retired. We needed a place to live. We had to do it quickly, and it was just enough room. We needed the room, and it was in a good town that was growing. The city was rapidly building. It was in a primo location, and the neighbors around it were nice, kept homes and groomed yards, and we thought it just needed, tender loving care, and it would.
You said the neighbors were nice. Did they ever seem to let on when you first moved on that there might be something going on, or were they oblivious to this fact and what was happening as well?
I've thought about that a lot because the neighbors have been here for a while. When we bought the house, there was 22 trees that surrounded it. The backyard you couldn't see. There was no sunlight coming through. It had so many trees. There were trees even over the swimming pool. And there was trees in the front of the house, like somebody planted it right in your front yard so you couldn't see your porch. There were trees surrounding it. When we bought the house, we removed all the trees. We had 22 trees taken out. We removed every tree from the property. And as I think about it and all the damage that occurred here, I can't believe that the neighbors could not have known something. Because there's no way you couldn't have known with all that damage. Mm-hmm. Then I think about the trees. And I think about, the house was covered in them. So it didn't have much visibility.
So it was kind of cut off from the rest of the neighborhood. They may have gone without notice of what was happening.
Yes, that's possible. But
now, did you notice, was there any damage similar to other homes in the area?
No.
Once you started to realize it. Okay, so it was definitely your house was...
It was definitely this house.
The focus,
Every other
okay.
house was well kept.
All right.
Definitely this one.
Which, again, would lend to the idea that you would think that this must be something just that this family was doing to this house.
Yeah.
Because no other house in the area was affected, and if there was something else going on, why wouldn't these other homes be affected? And I'm sure you'll fold into that part of the story for us a little bit later. All right, now you said you start to move in there, you start to get this house ready, you start realizing how much damage is actually around there, and you guys are going about fixing it. When does something out of the ordinary, out of nature, when does it start to unfold for you?
Well, there was a lot of weird things, and I write about some of them in the book. But one weird thing that happened, which I know how it relates now, was one year our batteries kept dying, our vehicle batteries. we started replacing batteries repeatedly. And I kept telling my husband that there's something wrong, you know. I immediately knew that there were people in the forest. I thought they were vagrants, and they were just hanging out there. To me, that's not uncommon. You know, coming from a large city, you have people that occupy vacant lots, you know, that sit in them. Or it's a prime location. I'm just saying it would be perfect. And I used to hear voices and see shadows, but there's no way I'm going out there to look at them. You know? But I figured they were either kids or vagrants. That's the only two things that came to mind.
Sure.
And when our batteries kept dying in our vehicles, I kept telling my husband to lock the vehicles at night. Because I kept telling him, the people across the street are getting in the cars. You know, they're trying to keep warm during the winter time. It made no sense. It was like they didn't have fire out there. I couldn't understand that. But I kept having the feeling that somebody was getting into the vehicles and doing something with the batteries, you know, draining the batteries. And it happened repeatedly to the point that my husband even took one of the vehicles down and had a gauge put on it. We replaced alternators. He put a gauge on it to make sure that it was charging as he drove. I mean, thousands of dollars spent on these vehicles. And finally, I told him, I said, just lock the vehicles at night. But he felt that we moved from L.A. You know, we used to live in the L.A. area. And he felt that this was, you know, a nice area, and there was no reason to have to lock everything at night, you know, like probably most people around here feel. And I kept telling him, you need to do that. And then I kept telling him about voices I was hearing outside and in the forest, and I kept having the feeling that somebody was sneaking around the house at night, and I kept hearing voices of our neighbors. And I kept telling them, one of our neighbors is a peeping Tom. Somebody's peeping through these windows, and I can feel it. And I can hear them. And, of course, I live with 4 men. They're all men. And they kept saying, well, you know, you're just hearing things or ignore it. And, you know, we don't have peeping Tom neighbors. And I kept telling them these things were happening. They're just not right. And then there were a lot of other little things, you know. But our children started putting food in the forest immediately. They thought they were feeding little animals, and they would go out there and put food. But what I did find strange about that was the times that they skipped putting food in the forest, which was a few times where they were gone or on vacation or doing stuff, they would come back and they would say, I need to put food in the forest because if I don't, I start hearing weird banging. You know, things start happening.
Well, hold on. Let me ask you, how old were the kids at this time?
Oh, I call them kids, but they're not.
Okay.
Our youngest was, when we first moved in the house, he was about 16.
Okay.
And probably our oldest was maybe 24.
All right, so it wasn't, because immediately jumping to mind, I've got, my age, I was thinking 10-year-old kids going to play in the woods, but if you thought there were vagrants and hobos and things living in the woods, why would you let your kids go out there? But these were late teen and early 20s people that were going in there. What inspired them, hey, let's go leave food in the woods?
They don't like to waste food. I have kids that are very, conscious of the environment and what's around them. And they just felt that, you know, an apple left rotting would be, you know, better served, put in the forest for a little raccoon or a rabbit or a squirrel or something to eat. And so they just started putting food out there. They would take stuff that we had that was going bad. You know, I wouldn't say leftovers from dinner, but I would say like apples and oranges and fruit, you know, different vegetables and things like that. And they would put them in the forest for the little animals before they went bad, you know, like 2 days before.
Sure.
And bread. They loved to put bread out there, you know, a loaf of bread that was about to go bad, or there was just the ends left or something like that.
Okay.
They would put that out there, thinking that some little animal would.
Right, they're just being conscientious of the animals and not letting the food go to waste. I can respect that. Kind of a neat little way to do that. So you've got this house that's kind of abused. You've got your kids out feeding something, and when they're not feeding it, something is getting irritated. And we have to take a break here. We'll continue finding out about your story, 100 Bigfoot Nights, a chilling true story about a family that has been dealing with a terrifying encounter with some type of cryptids. that are around their homes. That's what we're discussing this evening. We'll open up phone lines a little later on in the show. If you have questions or your own encounters for our guest, you can talk to her then. Christina Della Parker, our guest. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. We'll be back with more Coast to Coast right after this. Thank you for tuning in and spending your evening or early morning with me. 100 Bigfoot Nights, a chilling true story, a true chronicle of a terrifying encounter with Bigfoot. We'll continue talking to our guest, Christine Della Parker, about her real-life experiences. But before we do that, if you've missed any part of tonight's show or any of our shows and you'd like to be able to go back and find them easily, all you have to do is go to coasttocoastam.com and become a Coast Insider. Literally, for 15 cents a day, you can become an insider and get access to 5 years of past archives, live chats with the hosts, and with some of the best guests from Coast to Coast AM. And you'll also get inside news and information, so go check that out. Become a Coast Insider today. And here's some other great news for George Norrie fans. Beyond Belief, George's TV series, is free for 30 days right now. You can take advantage of that. Go check out beyondbelief.com or check out coasttocoastam.com for more information about that. But for 30 days, you can get access to Beyond Belief with George Norrie. When we come back, we'll find out about the beginning attacks from Bigfoot on an unsuspecting family. That'll continue next on Coast to Coast AM. Mark B. emails into me and says, damaged home in the middle of nowhere, once inhabited by a gaggle of disturbed foster children for sale. Cheap. That ranks right up there with former insane asylum situated on an old Indian burial ground conveniently adjacent to a dilapidated summer camp where those teenagers were chopped up last year. I've seen way too many horror movies for that. I don't care if it's homeless people or big feet. I'm going into that situation packing heat. I got to agree with that, Christine. When you're talking about this kind of opportunity, you get this house kind of set off, things are damaged and destroyed. You hear this. I mean, it does start to send off the weird vibe that there might be an underlying story here that they weren't real open with you about straight up. But you claim that you really didn't pick up any weird vibe from this.
No, not at all. We weren't thinking like that. No one thinks that way.
Sure.
Or at least we didn't. We're not really, we're not into all that stuff. And I guess if we were, we should have been paying attention, but I guess we weren't. We were just, to us, we live, it's like, this is our opportunity to get a nice home. And it's what we did. Just
when you were surrounded by trees and you had all of that in there, Fran wants to know, too, did you ever see any strange markings as though an animal had marked that territory or nesting materials? Anything that seemed weird or out of the ordinary when you had all of the trees kind of surrounding your property?
The only thing strange about it was that the backyard was probably about knee-deep in debris. I don't know if it fell from the trees. That's what we assumed. But it was so deep, you couldn't even walk in it. And it took them, I think, 60 or 70 wheelbarrows just to find the ground. You couldn't find the ground out there, which was kind of weird. And there was a pond, like a rubber, I don't know, I would think it would be a pond. But it's like a rubber piece of a part of a pool in the back, right out the back door. And it had stagnant water in it. And when you moved the water, it was black. And if you kicked it, thousands and thousands of tadpoles were there swimming around, like just a conglomerate of them. There were so many that there was probably little water between each one. And we couldn't believe it. We were like, what is this? And we had to take out them with a net and then take them to the stream and put them in the stream. And it took buckets and buckets of stuff before we could even dig it out. So, yeah, it was a backyard that didn't exist. It was just deep of debris and weird ponds.
It felt like an unkempt yard then. Just obviously the people that live there did not really take good care of their home or the property. So that's basically why you were getting such a great deal on it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Let's talk about these activities that started taking place. Now, you said you would start to hear voices and conversations around the house. Were these conversations where you could hear what they were talking about, or was it always that kind of just barely out of earshot kind of, so you could hear that kind of conversation?
Exactly. It was a mumble and something you couldn't make out. but you could hear it. It was voices. You're like, who's talking outside? There's someone out there. Yes. So that's exactly what it sounded like. A mumbling. And,
okay.
Other sounds, bangs. And I remember one year I was sitting in the office, I would sit there late at night and work on stuff. Now, we had a lot of mail and things like that, going through everything. And one year in particular, something kept scratching the wall right behind me. I was sitting at the desk, and it would happen in the wee hours of the morning. And I'd hear scratching, like little claw marks.
Outside?
Outside, just in our office, the way our desk sits and the way the house is built, it has a cove. And inside the cove is where we have a table set, on the front porch. And the window to the office sits next to the cove, facing the front of the house. And I was sitting at the desk, and behind me, which is the window, to the right of the window is the cove where it goes in. And I kept hearing scratching right there on the cove, on that wall. It would scratch and scratch and scratch. And I would look out, sometimes I would look out the window trying to see what it was, but I can't see in the cove from the window. I go outside. And I kept thinking, what is that noise? And I put my ear up to the wall, thinking it was some poor animal trapped in the wall, like a rat or something. And it would keep scratching. It would just go, and then it would stop. And then it would scratch again, and then it would stop. And it kept doing it repeatedly for months. And it was driving me crazy because I thought, God, what is going on? If it was an animal in that wall, I would have thought it would have died by now, It's
Actually, no. Vermin and things can live in the walls for years. Did you ever think to call in an exterminator to have it checked?
No, never thought to do that. But I would listen to the wall next to it and the adjoining walls and all around, and the sound was only on the wall up high, which is above the 6-foot level, on that wall. There was no other place around the wall. In other words, it wasn't like the animals traveling or there was a sound of something moving in the wall joining it or next to it or above it. It was just in that one spot. It just kept doing it repeatedly. Then it would stop, and then it would start again. It would stop, and it would start again. And it would do it from about, I would say, 2 o'clock in the morning to maybe the wee hours, which would be about 4 o'clock in the morning, like right before the sun came up.
So
and
you would hear you'd hear these scratchings, you'd hear voices. Did you ever think at some point maybe your house was haunted?
No.
Because this sounds like classic examples of people dealing with a haunted house. They'll hear disembodied voices. They'll hear strange scratching in the wall. Now, again, you being so close to a wooded area, you'd be surprised what kind of critters can get in. And especially with all the damage that had been done to your house, God knows what kind of things had access to the spaces between your walls at that time. You're saying the scratching wasn't deep and forceful, though. It wasn't like some large creature. It was just...
No. Yeah, it was just... It was on the siding. I could hear it. On the siding. We have siding on our house.
Sure.
You could hear it on the siding. It was scratching the siding, going up and down. But
now, was there ever any kind of
haunted? Never thought. We didn't think anything. You're talking to two people that we just don't have a clue.
Was there ever any kind of strange, pungent smell around your house? Because if I know a lot of animals will mark territories. And a Bigfoot, I would guess, if they were that territorial towards your area. Well, and we've heard of the skunk ape and things like that. I'm just wondering if there was any kind of weird smell associated with it.
Well, we have 4 dogs. So, yeah, there's pungent smells.
All right.
So we blame the dogs a lot of the time.
All right.
Let's say, oh, my God, what did you eat,
Well, how would your dogs react to these sounds and voices and things that appear to be outside? I mean, were they ever disturbed by it?
Yes. Our one dog, Foxy, she was always upset at night. She would lay at night with her snout on the window ledge, and she would just stare at the floor. She'd stare out the window, and we'd go upstairs and go to bed, and all of a sudden we'd hear her. She'd be going off, barking and barking and barking and growling. And we'd come back downstairs and we'd say, Foxy, what's going on? We'd turn on the lights. We'd look outside. Couldn't find anything. Then we'd say, we'd sit with her, and she'd just stare at us. She'd just be standing and looking at us like, don't you know what's going on? And then we would go to bed again, and a few minutes later, she'd do it again. And this kept happening over and over. And then during the night, she'd claw and want to go outside. And we'd let her out, and she'd go on the patio, just 5 feet out the door, and start barking and barking and barking and growling and pouncing her feet and puffing. She'd puff herself up. She was a big dog. She weighed about 130 pounds, at that time. And she would puff up and just be barking and barking. And we'd bring her back in the house. We'd say, Foxy, what are you doing? And she drove us crazy a lot. Well, one night, I got tired of doing this, so I thought, she must be seeing something. And I figured I would look out the window the minute she started to bark. I said, the minute she starts to bark downstairs, I'm going to run to the bedroom window in our bedroom and look out. Because she's got to be seeing something. There's something walking around out there. So one night I did. She started to bark, and instead of coming downstairs to quiet her, I got up and I looked out the window. And I saw this weird-looking animal. It came out of the forest, because there's a pathway directly across from our mailbox. It came out of the path, and it walked along the easement. There's a 10-foot easement before the forest starts. And it was walking towards the corner away from me. And I kept looking at this animal thinking, what are you? That is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And the only thought that came to mind was a hyena. I kept thinking, it looks like a hyena because of the shape. It had a sloped back. It had weird back legs and weird front legs. It was walking away. And I kept thinking, how come I can't see your face? Because, it walked probably about 50 feet. And while it's walking, I'm trying to get a look at it. It's in the moonlight, it's dark, but I can see it. And I'm waiting to see it turn its head so I can see the snout. Why doesn't it have a snout? Why is it, that I can identify this animal? And I never could see a face on it. It just looked weird, and it was just going across, and it went down to the corner's house, neighbor corner's house, and around the corner. And I don't know where it went, but it was very bizarre. And the next morning, I told my husband and my sons about it. I said, I saw an animal. It looked like a hyena, but it was huge. It was big. Now, we're not from the state, so I don't know what animals are here in the forest. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's something that they have here that I've never seen before. I don't know. And I found that to be strange. And the next day I looked it up on the Internet, and I tried to look for animals that looked like that, similar shape or size, and I never found anything. And it bothered me for the longest time because I know what I saw, and I just can't place it. And so I figured it was that animal. So what we did was eventually it got to the point where she wouldn't stop. Every night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, the dog's going off. She's barking and barking and barking. The other ones weren't doing much. They were hiding, and they were pretty quiet, but she was going off every time. So what we did was we ended up putting furniture in front of the window so she couldn't look out anymore. We thought, God, this is ridiculous.
Well, now, when you see something like this, did you ever think to call animal control?
No. I didn't. No, because I'm thinking it came out of the woods. It must be something that lives here.
So you are the living embodiment of every person that's ever been in a horror movie. You don't ask questions. You don't call for help. You don't. You're doing all of the quintessential horror movie no-nos.
Yes.
Okay.
We don't think that way. I don't know how to put it, but we don't.
Obviously, you do not watch enough TV and movies. I'll tell you that, Christine, because I'd have been on the phone with every law enforcement official when I see something that looks like a hyena crawling into the woods by my house.
No. I'm just like, well, I don't know what it is. I'm thinking, I've never been in the woods, so I have no idea what's in there. And I'm just thinking, well, and I told everybody in the house, and they all said, hyenas don't live here. Quit saying that.
Right. Well, that's just part of it.
Yeah. I had 4 men. Like I say, that everything I would tell them, they'd say, oh, well, whatever.
Oh, my goodness.
That's kind of funny, huh?
Yeah, so you've got these beasties roaming around. The dogs are freaking out, and
yeah,
I don't
Not
know.
a clue. Not a clue.
You two, you and your husband just kind of oblivious to all of this weirdness. Now, was the house ever abandoned at any point, or was the family, they lived there until they moved out and then you moved in immediately?
You know what? I have no idea, and I've asked myself that question many times because this house, literally, everything was petrified in it. There's no way they could have been living here. And I know that they led us to believe that when we saw them here, but there is no way. Because even when I took the curtains down, petrified means there's so much dust and dirt in between it that they literally could stand up by themselves. Mm-hmm. You could literally take the curtains off and they remained in shape. And I thought, these people, this is ridiculous. It was like years petrified. And to the point where everything went in the trash. We threw everything away, including the curtain rods. Even they were stuck. So, no. I don't believe they were living in it. I have to tell you the truth, because no toilet worked. No running water worked. The stove, they said, had coals in it, where someone cooked the inside of the stove. And I remember me and my husband thinking, did they know that thing turned on, And the fireplace was black. It had burnt to a level that we had to replace the insert. The brick inside, it's like an insert brick, had to be replaced because it had been heated so hot that it actually cracked it. And I don't know what temperature that has to reach. But nothing worked in the house. The dishwasher didn't work, nothing. Everything had to be thrown away. We just ripped everything out and threw it away. Everything. I mean, literally everything.